back. Well, turning now to the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar. Former United Nations Chief Kofi Annan was back at the UN on Friday and called for the safe return of Rohingya refugees to Myanmar. Well, this comes after more than 500,000 fled to Bangladesh, with thousands of Rohingya still fleeing into that country. Many say they were the targets of brutal government-led violence. Joining me now is Jeffrey Gettleman, the South Asia Bureau Chief for the New York Times. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us. And firstly, I want to congratulate you on an incredible piece of journalism that highlights the atrocities taking place in Myanmar. Tell us about some of the stories you heard firsthand from the Rohingya survivors.
Well, I've been doing this work for 20 years as a journalist in conflict zones, and I have never heard such horrendous, upsetting, depressing stories as I just did. The Rohingya are being massacred right now in Burma, and hundreds of thousands have fled into Bangladesh, and they're packed into these really crowded, squalid, messy camps on the border. And I went there as a journalist to talk to people about what they were fleeing from. And I met one young woman who had really the worst story I've ever heard face to face from anyone. And she told me about soldiers coming into her village, burning down the houses one by one, trying to run away, and then being captured. And she was a young mother. She had a toddler boy in her arms. And she said the soldiers ripped the boy out of her arms, threw him into a fire, and killed him right in front of her. And then she was raped, left in a house that was set on fire. Her mother was killed, her brother was killed, her sisters were killed, and she ended up escaping barely, running away naked, covered in blood, and making her way to Bangladesh. You hear a story like this and you're so shocked and troubled and angered and deeply disturbed. But it wasn't the only story like that. It was the opposite. You step into these camps and anybody who I spoke to had seen massacres and atrocities like this. And so there were all these different stories from different parts of Burma, from people that weren't even in the same camp, that were miles away telling me the same thing, that just added up to this picture that was really one of the most horrible things I had ever heard.
Yeah, Jeffrey, it is unfathomable that humans can behave that way, ripping an 18-month-old toddler from her mother's arms and throwing it alive on the fire. It just seems... I just cannot comprehend. What other stories did you hear like that?
Basically, there was a pattern of brutality and destruction that was going on. And this is in late August. There's an insurgency in this part of Myanmar. There are rebels attacking government forces. But instead of fighting those rebels, the government forces just went on a rampage against civilians. And there's a long history here of discrimination and dehumanization and demonization of the Rohingya. And so year after year, these people have been treated like villains inside Myanmar. And so once this rebel attack happened, it became an excuse by the government to just try to wipe out all the Rohingyas. And they burned down hundreds of villages, destroyed crops, burned down trees. They were just trying to erase these people from the landscape.
Well, that was Jeffrey Gettleman, South Asia Bureau Chief for the New York Times, earlier, describing the stories, the horrific stories that he's heard from Rohingya refugees fleeing Myanmar. Well, more than 1 million Puerto Ricans are still without clean water. Some people are so desperate they're drinking from water pumped from hazardous waste sites. US officials say many water sources won't be safe until infrastructure is repaired and power restored. But 91% of Puerto Ricans were without power Friday, 8% more than the day before. The acting US Secretary of the Army visited the island to survey the damage. He's leading more than 10,000 soldiers on the island, but he says it's clear that tremendous challenges still remain. The wildfires in Northern California have wiped out thousands of buildings, leaving scorched earth and rubble in its place. Well, nearly 90,000 hectares have burned since the fires erupted last Sunday, and at least 36 people are dead. Officials are searching through the damage for hundreds of missing people, but they're finding some bodies burnt beyond recognition. Well, meanwhile, thousands of firefighters are making progress containing the inferno, but officials warn that strong winds could cause flames to spread over the weekend. Well, CNN's Miguel Marquez has the latest on the crews working to put out these deadly fires.
Firefighters battling from the ground and the air. The weather, for now, cooperating. Crews finally getting the upper hand on fires that killed dozens, leveled entire neighborhoods, and burned through nearly 250,000 acres.
Today the weather is cooperating, but we are going to go back into red flag again, and that's going to be an issue that we will have to keep a close eye with low humidities and potentially wind for the next couple days.
The magnitude of the loss only grows. The Petaluma home of Peanuts creator Charles Schultz destroyed, along with all his personal memorabilia. His widow evacuated and survived. The fire spared nothing, even a Santa Rosa fire station gutted. Crews now doubling efforts to cut lines, burn out brush and undergrowth, and prepare for hot, dry winds in the days ahead.
That was CNN's Miguel Marquez reporting. We're now getting harrowing video from the first night the fires raged. This Bodycam footage released by the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office shows a deputy responding to the emergency. He runs through raining ash, drives through walls of flame as embers fly off his car, and at one point he rescues a woman from her burning home. Take a listen.
Where are you at? Come on! Screw your shoe! Come on, she's disabled. All right, let me get her feet. Her husband's right behind you.
Sheriff 1 Sanford, we're doing a carry out.
Ready?
Hold on. There's a house on fire.
Let's go. Oh, you gotta get her up.
Okay, hold on. There we go. Okay. Watch your leg. Sir! You got a gun!
Officials are investigating how the fire started. Well, it's not very often we talk about a possible hurricane striking parts of Europe. However, that's just what we're tracking. Meteorologist Derek Van Dam joins us with the details. Derek.
And technically, Ophelia won't be a hurricane, quote-unquote, when it reaches the United Kingdom and Ireland, but we're really splitting hairs here because this is going to pack quite a punch as it moves, or I should say races, in a northeasterly direction. Currently, Hurricane Ophelia just to the south and east of the Azores Islands, 160-kilometer-per-hour sustained winds, a very well-defined eye with this particular hurricane. By the way, wind gusts just shy of 200 kilometers per hour. This makes it a Category 2 Atlantic hurricane, but this time it's being picked up by the westerlies and a cold front that's moving in as well. That's going to allow for the system to just race off to the northeast. But notice it's really holding its strength as it goes forward over the next several days. It'll become extra tropical. That means it's just losing some of its tropical characteristics. That's why this technical jargon that meteorologists use, we can't really quite call it a hurricane when it makes landfall in Ireland. Again, that will be late Monday and into the day on Tuesday, but it will bring strong winds, hurricane force, and heavy rainfall across this region. Look at our computer models depicting it a well-defined eye with our forecast winds. It will be a rough start to the week across Dublin into Edinburgh, as well as even London, feeling the effects of the system. And when I say that, it's really the wind field that's going to expand as we go forward in time. We're also going to get some rain bands associated with this moving in as early as late Sunday, and really conditions conditions deteriorate for the day on Monday and into Tuesday for Dublin and the surrounding areas. You can see how temperatures drop off considerably as well. Bring it to the other side of the world. We're tracking heavy rainfall, torrential rain, I should say, across central and northern Vietnam that has brought, unfortunately, scores of fatalities. We have had nearly 400% our average rainfall since the middle of July. And unfortunately, there is another typhoon that is headed that way. This is Tropical Storm Kanun, but it is expected to strengthen as it impacts Hainan into southern China and eventually across south central Vietnam, bringing more rain and the potential for landslides and mudslides. So very active across the world right now in terms of the weather. Anna, back to you.
All right, Derek, good to see you. Thanks for the update and thanks for your company. I'm Anna Corrin. I'll be back with the headlines in just a moment.